Welcome back, Chappelle. Specifically, welcome back, Honors. All right, so, oh man. So it's about 8:45, right? And we're getting after it this morning. So what we're going to be talking about today in class, that's right, for some of y'all that have figured this out for a second. I know somebody like, I don't know. Who am I going to pick on right now? I know somebody like Grace is sitting in the back right now going like, wait a minute, 8:45. We haven't had his class yet. How does he know he's flipping? All right, so I planned this stuff out pretty far in advance. All right, so don't worry about it. It's all good, but that's a great question, Grace. Very proud. So now, big thing that we're getting into today. So we started talking about this stuff in class today. We were talking about the cultural perspectives of Egypt, right? We were talking about consistencies that existed throughout most of their time, right? Talking about particular little odds and ends when it comes to why do I keep touching my hair? Well, not even just that, but so big odds and ends where it's their mythology, their political structure, their representations of the afterlife, their blah, 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 right? So we talked about their geography, the basis of Egypt, right? Cultural stuff, the things that you know the best. But what you don't know at all probably are some of their historiography and things about them. Now some of you are I know what geography is and I know what a biography is. What's historiography? Well, historiography, the big thing about it is it's kind of the placement in time of certain achievements, interactions, or major events, and kind of their causes, their effects, what led up to them. It's understanding how to graph time. Now, to be able to graph anything in a historical sense, you have to be able to break that period of time down, right? So we can't just look at Egypt and be like, Egypt! We have to actually separate it into time periods. And there are 7 of them for ancient Egypt. 7 time periods, right? Now, some of you are like, I have to memorize 7 different things. You do. All right, so, and then not to mention the fact that it's not actually nearly as difficult as you think it is. All right, so, wrong button. All right, nope, come back. So, it's actually not nearly as difficult as you think it is because I lost all that stuff. That's no bueno. All right, so, wait, can I do this? Nope. All right, then. All right, well, whatever. All right, so let's do this real fast. So I'm going to write these up here, okay? Got it? And we are going to then move through them, all right? So basically, they look like such, all right? We've got the Archaic Period, right? We've got the Old Kingdom, okay? Kingdom. All right, I really want these to, this point to be a little bit bigger. So how about we'll do this, okay? How about we'll take a pause. All right, I'll come right back, okay? Welcome back. All right, glad that we could cut that little bit out, but it was mainly just me writing. So what I want you to do, we're going to go ahead and make this real nice and big all right? And before we even get started on the historiography of ancient Egypt, you need to pause your screen. There they are. Pause your screen and jot these down, all right? So as you can see, there are actually 7 ancient Egyptian time periods, right? So in those 7 ancient Egyptian time periods, oh gosh, we've got the Archaic Period, the Old Kingdom period, the First Intermediate, the Middle Kingdom, the Second Intermediate, the New Kingdom, and the Third Intermediate, right? So as you can tell, it's actually a very easy way to remember them because it moves in a pattern, right? It goes Archaic and then it goes Kingdom, Intermediate, Kingdom, Intermediate, Kingdom, Intermediate. It's very easy to remember, all right? So after you pause that, let's get back into it, shall we? All right, so make sure you go back if you didn't get them and kind of jot those down. There we go. All right, so well, let's keep talking, all right? So with this, we have to start at the beginning. So first and foremost, we're going to move into the Archaic Period, right? So the Archaic Period of ancient Egypt has to do with their earliest establishments, right? Now, the biggest thing about Archaic Period Egypt, one thing you need to know out the gate, you need to know what the heck the word archaic means, right? So the word archaic, actually, let me double check my time, 34, money, good stuff. All right, so wait, yes, nice. All right, so anyway, it is the old way, or the original use of something. So basically the Archaic era is the establishment of the civilization known as ancient Egypt, right? We're not talking about the original Neolithic period, nomads showing up. We're not talking about when people started converting to farming. We're not talking about when the very first what's called an agricultural package came from Southwest Asia and the Fertile Crescent and made its way to Egypt, right? When they brought things like einkorn, wheat, and barley and things like that for the Egyptians to grow. We're talking about the establishment of them as a civilization, right? And that was done under this guy, right? This man is responsible for actually a lot of different progressive things that happened in ancient Egypt. That is his death mask. He is the very first and important pharaoh of Egypt. He united the two kingdoms together. His name is, what is it? Very good job. One of you has a name. I just got to think of one off the top of my head. Good job. Zoe, right? Very good job, Zoe. She knew the answer, right? Menes, all right? Menes is his name. Hilarious story really quick about Menes is we believe that he actually was killed by a hippopotamus, all right? So, or possibly a pack of wild dogs, or drowned in the Nile. We're not really sure, but I like to believe that it's hippopotamus death, all right? So anyway, but Menes is very important because his biggest thing is he united these two kingdoms together. Before you start jotting this down, listen really quickly, all right? So Menes is huge because by uniting the upper and the lower kingdoms together of Egypt, that created a centralized form of an empire, right? It created an empire or a civilization that had a consistent culture throughout, right? It wasn't like the Fertile Crescent. It wasn't like Mesopotamia or Samaria or Babylon that had all these different little city-states, that had all these different little forms of writing, and then all eventually kind of mushed together through cultural diffusion. Have I not told you all what cultural diffusion means yet? Oh, just really quick, just somewhere very important. Take a break. Hold on. Pause. Cultural diffusion is huge. It is the most important word in this course, all right? So cultural diffusion, right? Spelt exactly how it sounds. Cultural diffusion, all right? So cultural diffusion is when cultures or traits of cultures spread through either war or trade, all right? So these Sumerian things spread through war, as we talked about yesterday, because like some of our leaders, I can't stop touching my hair. So a lot of these leaders were warlords, right? Like Nebuchadnezzar and Hammurabi and people like that. They actually spread their culture through war. Whereas the Old Kingdom in like Egypt itself was one centralized area. They spread through trade and the unification under Menes, right? Cultural diffusion is very important. So now, then we moved into the Old Kingdom. Now the Old Kingdom is massively important because it's the first of the three kingdom periods. Now the kingdom periods are all characterized by cultural growth and prosperity. And there's a lot of really amazing things that happened in the Old Kingdom that a lot of y'all probably actually know a teeny little bit about, right? So now, the intermediate periods, this is kind of just a disclaimer with a little asterisk down here. The intermediate periods, on the other hand, are to follow or characterized by like hardship, death, disease, and rebellion. Ugh. All right, so anyway, now, the Old Kingdom, the big one though. So we know that Archaic Period is characterized by Menes doing his thing, right? So now, the Old Kingdom is going to span the 3rd to the 6th dynasties, right? Now, some of y'all are immediately like, wait a minute. How come they don't have, like, surnames? Why don't they have, like, last names and stuff like that? They use numbers instead, all right? Or historiographically speaking, we use numbers. Now, the 3rd to the 6th dynasties range from 2686 BC all the way up to 2181 BC, right? So about a 500-year period of time, which is a large period of growth, right? That's a huge period of growth. Now, started by the infamous King Djoser. All right, so Djoser is the first true god king of Egypt. Remember what we were talking about today in class about the unification of Amun and Ra and the expansion of their mythology and things like that? A big concept of Amun-Ra is that he is formless, right? So according to Old Kingdom Egyptians, they're the ones that started the tradition of their pharaoh being a part of God himself, right? Of being the presence of Amun-Ra on earth. So they revered this person as a god. So they believed Djoser was a god. Djoser's biggest thing, though, was that he centralized power in Egypt by turning each city into what's known as a nome. Now, a way to think about this when I'm talking about centralization is a way to look at a nome as more like a state, right? Like the United States of America has individual states that govern themselves autonomously and then report back to the federal government, right? It's much like that. So Djoser started the trend of centralized government 4,500 years ago, over that. That's insane, right? And I also like to, I have Smooth Move Djoser down here because it's funny a little how his name is spelled because it's DJ Ozer. So I always just imagine that he's in like some club or something like that spinning and it's just like... Now, anyway, so this right here is the nome system itself. Notice how everything's broken down. You have Cairo in the upper delta area, but then every single time they would actually put these little lines and break these different areas up by their major cities, right? So that way, these cities could effectively collect taxes and then send those taxes back to Cairo in the capital, right? So isn't that amazing? Now, the early phases of Egyptian architecture are also going to begin in the Old Kingdom. The big examples of Old Kingdom architecture are the Median Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, the Pyramid of Djoser, and the Temple of Djoser, right? So the cool things about it is like, Old Kingdom early architecture is kind of rough. It did get better, all right? Some very nice pyramids you know of very well were actually constructed in the Old Kingdom as well, or at least began their construction in the Old Kingdom. But this one right here, that's the Median Pyramid, right? Now, really quickly, some of y'all immediately are just being absolute, flat-out geniuses right now. I heard you, Mallory, right? Those wheels were turning, and Mallory was like, wait a minute. That looks kind of like a ziggurat. It does look like a ziggurat, right? So, again, cultural diffusion! So probably important because we know that the Egyptians did have direct contact with the Mesopotamians in the Fertile Crescent area. So the good to solid chance is they witnessed or saw or learned how to do large-scale architecture from the Mesopotamians. So notice their early pyramids look kind of like a ziggurat, but like with the tiered wedding cake system, except they don't have stairs in theirs. It had shafts that went inside of them, and you could actually move around on the inside. This one, on the other hand, is the Bent Pyramid, as you can see. Why it's called the Bent Pyramid, because it was like they were going really well, and then, oh, we ran out of blocks. All right, so, and then they had to, like, kind of just come straight up to the top as fast as they could. Now, also, though, the Bent Pyramid is a very important piece of architecture, because as you can see, the early Egyptian trend, pyramids are supposed to be smooth on the sides, all right? And the Bent Pyramid actually retained some of its smoothness, right? Now, the Bent Pyramid also was one of the very first pyramids to have almost universally limestone construction, right? So limestone is a mineable material that exists in Egypt in a large amount, right? It's what most of their buildings and also most of their pyramids are built out of, right? Now, limestone's also got another amazing attribute. You can also burn limestone and create this stuff called quicklime or lime, and then you can mix that with a couple of other ingredients in the sediment and then water, and you make a primitive form of cement. All right, so like it's a very, very genius thing. Now, and also we know that the Egyptians actually did use mortar or cement in a lot of their different items or a lot of different things they constructed. So, like if you're looking at this though, that's the Pyramid of Djoser, right, where we believe he was buried, and then also this right here is the Temple of Djoser, right? So, as you can tell, like Egyptian architecture took a major leap forward. And then you also had more construction underneath the Old Kingdom, right? Construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza began, and the Sphinx began in 2586 BC under the Emperor Khufu, right? So, what a name. Now, they showed the gains of architecture and in Egyptian development, not just in that simple sense, because look at the difference between the Pyramid of Giza, right, and the other pyramids we just looked at. More uniform construction. Probably more use of mathematical equations and geometry, more use of building materials, accounting systems, like organization of labor, right? I mean, we're talking about, and I know a lot of you are like, whoa, you mean slavery? And yes, we do know that like a lot of these pyramids were built by slaves, but all of these ancient societies had slaves, all right? So like in all of these ancient societies were enslaving people of neighboring areas. Like most of your slaves at the time were like at one point believed to possibly be Hyksos, Hittites, possibly Nubians at one point, because the Egyptians and the Nubians didn't get along very well sometimes. But also, though, go ahead and jot this down right here, art. The Egyptians began to create their very first forms of art under the Old Kingdom, right? And when I say began to create it, mainly it progressed to full-form sculptures that had never been seen before, right? So they began to create sculptures that were proportionally accurate, that were to scale sometimes, actually large sculptures that were completely to scale. And the amazing thing is that they were full form, right? You could actually, you could walk all the way around them, right? And to imply movement, we know this, that actually we believe the Greeks picked this up from them, is they would actually have 1 foot forward, right? 1 foot forward to try and imply that the person's moving, to not make them look so stoic. But that's an amazing leap forward, because like in the Archaic Period, they didn't have these things. And then we get to the first intermediate. The first intermediate period was from about 2181 BC to about 2055. Now, some of y'all are immediately noticing, you're like, wait a minute, that's at least a little bit short, even though it's bad, right? Well, it's mainly because it was a giant civil war, right? So political war ended up dividing Upper and Lower Egypt. Again, after Menes had actually united them together, war broke out, and Upper and Lower Egypt actually went into a massive civil war, right? So now temples and tombs are going to be pillaged during this process. Lower Egypt is going to eventually conquer Egypt and then reunify the land under a dynastic shift, right? So, really quickly though, how does that concept conflict with their idea of like a theocracy, right? Because we talked about that today in class, the theocratic system, the idea that God is king and king is God, right? And our relation between our religion and our political structure are like this, right? Like a meshed together, wired together system. Well, it conflicts due to the fact that if your king is believed to have been God, then how has anybody got the gall to rebel against them, right? Now, just really, really quick, this is what your average Egyptian soldier looked like during the first intermediate period. And another amazing thing is that, yes, they had trained and tamed cheetahs, and actually they used to try and help fight. And they also had chariots as well in one of the later periods, because they had actually picked those up from either the Hyksos or the Hittites. I think it was the Hittites, but I'm not positive, all right? So, and of course they were very big on projectile weapons, bows and arrows and stuff like that, but they actually had very, very simple, but we'll get into that later, or when we talk about the Hittites. But then you're going to see the Middle Kingdom, right? The Middle Kingdom is going to have a massive rebirth of intelligence. They're going to have a massive leap forward in their government, and it's going to span the 11th and 12th dynasties, and Senseret is going to have the biggest impact as Pharaoh, right? Now, getting back to what I was talking about here in a second, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, right? So we're going to finish this up right here. We're going to talk, and I want you to ponder that question. How can you have a theocratic system and a civil war? It doesn't make any sense, right? If you believe your king is God, then why would you ever rebel against him, right? Well, we'll talk about that, the big thing about that tomorrow. Just kind of ponder that thought a little bit, all right? And then I'll ask you that tomorrow during the warm-up. But Senseret in the Middle Kingdom had his major leap forward and actually calmed everything down after Lower Egypt conquers Upper Egypt, right? So he worked to establish Osiris as the chief god to explain the Nile and the authority of the pharaoh, right? Like we talked about with the Osiris myth. He created the very first effective bureaucratic system. And what a bureaucratic system is a tiered system of society, right? So the way a bureaucratic system looks is kind of like this, all right? So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. But yeah, a bureaucracy is a multi-level government, all right? So we'll come over here. So let's use a common symbol of the Egyptians. We'll use like the symbol of the pyramid, right? So this is a good way to explain a bureaucracy, all right? So you've got the pyramid. You've got the pharaoh at the top, and then as you go down, the classes shift, but also these people have different jobs, right? So you would have priests right here. Now here's the thing, as you go down, their number increases. You have one pharaoh, let's say we have 12 priests, right? And then you have right here, you've got, we'll say, civil servants, right? You've got people that work for the empire and work for the pharaoh, so we're going to say we're going to have 24 of those, right? And then we have tax collectors right here, right? And then we have farmers down here, and then we have slaves at the bottom. So what a bureaucracy is a multi-level government to try and create an efficient way of collecting taxes or administering over an entire culture or empire. All right, but that's it. All right, so that's the flip for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. All right, make sure you got all the time periods and stuff like that. We got up to the Middle Kingdom. Not a ton of other stuff happens in the Middle Kingdom, but tomorrow we're going to actually be talking about life in ancient Egypt and kind of the life of like a regular person by the time we hit the Middle Kingdom era. So I'll talk to you guys then. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Looking forward to seeing you. Have a good one.